before realizes we don't just take the easy ones. We generally get some sharp questions, which I think we like. Of course, we want to respect one another, but clearly we're going to have differences of opinion, and that's okay. It's not my job to convince you. It's not your job to convince me. It's our job to build a little understanding tonight. That's really the American way. The more we're talking, the more I think we're able to come together as a country. So with that, I want to talk a little bit about the process yesterday. I'm not going to talk a lot about the violence. I suspect we'll have some questions, and I'm happy to answer those questions, but I just want to talk about the process for about 3 minutes. You know, the Constitution in the 12th Amendment lays out what the job of Congress was yesterday. And it's just one sentence. And for me, it's really foundational. Once I focused on the 12th Amendment, it was easier to get my head around the whole process. So I'm just going to read you the one sentence from the Constitution. It says, "The President of the Senate shall, in the presence of the Senate and the House, open all the certificates, and the votes shall then be counted." Now, I think when I first read that, I was a little surprised that there was not a bigger role for Congress. You know, in the same 12th Amendment, there's all kinds of details about what does Congress do if you've got multiple candidates who get electoral votes like 3 or 4, and so nobody gets a majority. I mean, it is hundreds of words about what to do then. But really, the certification or the acceptance, the counting of the state certifications is just that one sentence. And I think that's really where a lot of the frustrations from me and from all of you come in, is that constitutionally there's not a large role for Congress in this. In fact, really the President of the Senate is the only one who's given an act to do, and that is to count the votes. The role of the Senate and the House is to be a witness, not a judge, but a witness to the ceremonial act. And so I think that's where so much of the frustration came in. Ultimately, it made my job a little bit easier. Obviously, there's some things we've got to tackle, but that particular constitutional ceremony was not the right way to do it. And 2 states, as you probably know, not 6, only 2 had their electoral votes challenged. The votes in the House and the Senate were pretty resoundingly to accept the state certifications. So I could talk a lot more, but I think we're going to get into it with the questions, and so I'm looking forward to that. Again, this is Dusty Johnson. For those of you that are just joining, hit *3 if you want to ask a question, and we'll get you in the lineup. We've got lots of questions lined up already, so I'm sorry to those of you we don't get to. We've got Jasmine with our team who is playing MC tonight. Jasmine, what am I missing?
I think you summed it up, Dusty. Our first caller, we're going to go to Kathy from Sioux Falls. Kathy, you are on the line.
Hi, Representative Dusty Johnson. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely, Kathy, you bet.
Hey, I've got just kind of curious because everything you said I agree with up to the point where, you know, how things work. And I remember our second president, Thomas Jefferson, he was kind of in the same, situation as Vice President Pence. And he had to do which electors to choose and not choose. This isn't what my question is, but I just want to, from what you said, and boy, he ended up being the President of the United States. Exactly the same, but nothing's ever exactly the same. But my question to you really is, there's a gal named Maria Zack. I don't know if you know her from Nations in Action. And they came up with, everybody's been saying there's info out there, and, you know, until you have the smoking gun. Well, now they don't have the smoking gun. They have the hand that held the smoking gun. And as far as she's bringing out information, she gave it to Barry Loudermilk. She gave it to Devin Nunes. She gave it to Louis Gohmert yesterday, last night. Things had already kind of fallen apart at Capitol Hill. And then later in the evening, you know, you guys all re-met again, and things move forward. And I kind of wondered what happened in that. She brought information, an Italian affidavit, and that there was foreign interference. I mean, this guy wasn't given an affidavit of telling how it happened. He did it. And I'm wondering if you guys have that affidavit, if you have that information, because now it's not an investigation anymore. It's evidence of election interference, foreign interference. And he blatantly said that, you know what, he was the man that uploaded the software. He thought it was an exercise. I mean, you've got affidavits. You got kind of heads even rolling in Italy. I mean, when you've got people, senior staff members of our Foreign Office in Italy, and they've been dealing with people, and he retires 1 or 2 days before the election.
Hey, Kathy, I don't want to cut you off, but we want to get to a lot of questions.
No, I agree, but now this is, everything that happened yesterday doesn't mean anything except now let's do something. Let's fix this. Let's go see what this information is, because until the president is put in office on January 20th, January 6th was not even in the Constitution. The time in between, as far as doing electors, what the date was, there is still time to for this to go back to the states. I don't know how you guys do it now, but and let them pick their electors, that they let them hear the evidence and see what's been going on. And this is a guy that did it. He flat out says that he changed the votes.
Kat, do you know what state that was for?
I think we might have lost Kat.
Okay, no problem. Well, Kathy, I'm sorry. It's over. Now, that's not to say that I'm not interested in your affidavit, and if you can get it to our office, of course I will review it. But there is no chance that President Trump is going to have a second term. You don't have to take my word for it. President Trump said that within the hour. He was very clear. He said there will be a new administration on January 20th. And I think too many politicians, frankly, to try to make themselves seem tougher or more popular, or frankly, a lot of them to raise money. Some of my colleagues in the House, I think, have been overselling the prospects of some of these legal approaches. And so I just want to do you the respect of being honest with you. You say, January 6th is not in the Constitution. That's correct. It's not. But the Constitution is very clear, and law is very clear, that once the states submit their certifications by what is called the safe harbor deadline, their results are, quote, conclusive. They're conclusive. And listen, we have a president-elect, and I don't have to be happy about it, and neither do you. But I just don't want to mislead you into thinking, maybe tomorrow, and maybe if and there are just too many people doing that. So anyway, with regard to the affidavit, of course, I'm willing to review it. I think that may identify some things that we need to do in the future. But the right time and place for the filing of that kind of information would have been in a court of law. That's how we prove things in this country, is in courtrooms. So, all right, Jasmine, who else you got?
Norman from Armor, you're on the line.
Appreciate you taking tough questions. My question is why you supported a bill to send so much money to foreign countries, including gender studies, when we have so many people here in our own country that are really hurting and need the help.
Well, good question, Norman. Tough question. I don't want to listen. I'm going to give you a 60-second answer, but for anybody, if you think I missed something, ask a follow-up, because I'm not trying to dodge anything. I just want to get to a lot of questions tonight. Norman, like with 10 million for gender studies in Pakistan, the president asked for that money. And that foreign aid you're hearing about, that was not a part of the COVID relief package. It was part of the funding bill that funds our whole federal government for the whole year. Now, listen, you got a right to be confused, because Nancy Pelosi did something that I disagreed with, and she put the COVID relief package, that bill, along with the annual spending bill, and she had us pass it with one vote. That was the wrong thing to do, but she runs the House, and she gets to decide how these votes are structured. But the president asked for that. All of that foreign aid that you've heard complaints about, the money to Egypt, the money to Bangladesh, those were in his budget proposal that he advanced in February. And that doesn't mean that it's the right thing to do. About 1% of our annual spending is to foreign countries. And I think part of the reason the president's always been such a strong proponent of it is that he knows that China is spending 10 times more than we are. China is trying to be the superpower of the world. And there are a lot of countries who don't want to do business with China if they don't have to. They don't trust them. They think they're an imperial regime that's seeking to conquer them. And if they can get a little help from America, they want to do so. One final comment. Gender studies in Pakistan just sounds terrible. So I did ask the president's team exactly what they meant when they were asking for that. Well, Pakistan has a terrible track record with women's rights. They treat women terribly, like second-class citizens or worse. And so this was just an opportunity, to make sure that we're educating young people. And this is not like a transgendered education or anything like that. I think the name of it is maybe a little misleading. So thanks, Norman. Hopefully that answered your question. What else?
Kurt from Phillip, you're on the line.
Yeah, Dusty. My name's Kurt, and I'm from Phillip. say, I got some questions because I'm pretty upset along with most of the people in South Dakota. How come, they got the evidence, they have evidence, and you know it, on all these tainted elections in these states, and they were not allowed to go to these courts. Why wouldn't the Congress stand up and say, let's get this cleared up, both for the Democrats and the Republicans? Let's clear this up, let's hear it, let's investigate it. But hell no, you guys just pushed it under, just like everything they've done so far since the Democrats have been in office, I guess. But I'm pretty upset about it because you know what? If this goes through and you guys let this slide, which you're doing, our nation is going to be done as a nation. And it ain't right. And as far as I'm concerned, I've been listening to you answer some questions here tonight, and to me, I think you're blowing smoke on most of them, but that's my opinion there. And so, I don't know,
okay,
give me an answer why you don't think, give me an answer why you don't think it was right.
Let's get specific. Kurt, let's get specific.
Yeah, let's
re-ask a question that you think I blew smoke on. Give me exactly what gap in the answer you don't think I addressed. And
I don't think Trump pledged or wanted the money for that transgender stuff and wherever in the heck it was. It was probably part of the bill that he had to sign in order to get the other stuff done. That was thrown in with him, and that's the stuff that come with it. I don't think it's something he introduced.
Kurt, what you're saying is not true. In
Really?
the president's budget in February, you can find it on the website. Just search for the president's budget, and you can call our office tomorrow, and our team will get you a link to the exact page in the president's budget. Not a bill that he signed that we force-fed him, but in the budget that he submitted as the boss through his administration, his requests to Congress, and it had $10 million for these gender programs to teach women in Pakistan. Now, maybe you don't think I'm telling the truth, but it is the God's honest truth, Kurt, and you don't get to tell me that the truth isn't true. Now, that being said, let's get back to your main question about, I think you just feel like we're not standing up for the president. Is that right?
No, I'm not talking about the president in this. Yes, it does concern him because he didn't get voted in. But all this illegal election stuff, all these votes that come in late, all this mail-in voting, you know darn well there was fraud. And you guys, as the Congress, and we've called you, people have called you continually, as you know, and
Kurt,
Senator
can I ask you a question?
And stuff. Okay, why didn't you guys stand up and push to get this, the whole Congress, and I know you can't do it by yourself, but to get this stuff investigated, because you know darn well that there was fraud.
Okay.
And why haven't you guys stood up to get this stuff investigated?
Kurt, can I ask you a question?
You bet.
Okay, so in every single one of these states, there is a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney. That's the federal prosecutor. Now, not a single one of them worked for Obama. Trump fired all those people. Every single state has a U.S. attorney that works for Donald Trump. That's their boss. Every single one of these states has a U.S. Marshal, the top federal law enforcement in the state, who works for Donald Trump, appointed by him. Not a single one of them worked for Obama.
Yep.
Now, listen, you say there's widespread fraud.
Yep.
Why doesn't a single Trump-appointed prosecutor, a single Trump-appointed U.S. Marshal, or a single Trump-appointed judge agree with you?
Well, probably because they're in the same pockets of whoever's paying them off, just like the rest of you guys, like Thune and Rounds and you, and most of the other people that don't stand up for this nation. That's how people feel. That is how people feel.
Kurt,
and when
you
it
think
comes
the president
hired
a bunch of crooked
when
people?
it comes down to you to help make a decision, all you guys would have to do is work it through. That, you know what, yeah, we'll hear it. Let's take 10 days. Let's review it. Let's investigate it. But no, you run it through. That tells me that you guys are getting your pockets lined. I don't know what, but all I know is nobody has any trust in our Congress anymore, in our government, and I don't know what to do about it.
Hey, Kurt,
really
listen, Kurt. To me, logic means something, and facts mean something. So here's my question for you.
You bet.
5 of these 6 states have Republican legislatures. Most of them have Republican governors. Every single one of them have Republican federal prosecutors, Republican U.S. Marshals. The president has redefined the federal judiciary with more appointments to the bench than any other president in the history of this country. You don't trust any of those people But why would you trust Nancy Pelosi's House of Representatives to
I
pick
don't
the
trust
president
her.
instead?
I trust.
Well, but
I
that's
trust
what you're
that.
doing, Kurt. If you want Congress to make this decision instead of all of these Trump appointees, listen, any power you give Nancy Pelosi and the folks in Congress will be used for evil at some point. The more and more power we concentrate in Washington, the more I think we have to be willing to reap what we sow. We got too much power in this town as it is.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. I'm just saying, where's it going to stop? You know what? Why wouldn't they even hear it? Why wouldn't they hear it? And why wouldn't you guys get on board and say, this has to be heard, we need to get it investigated? I want to know that. People are upset because this wasn't got
there's
every
not
door
one
open.
person.
They had
There's not one person on the planet who thinks after 60 days of all of these Trump federal prosecutors and U.S. Marshals and the Trump legal team and state election officials, there's nobody after 60 days and nobody's found anything. Another 10 days is not going to change a single mind. And in 10 more days, you'd think there was just as much fraud as you think there is now. The president's legal team, listen, I don't love this fact. The president's legal team's gone 0-60. And 10 more days, that's not constitutional, Kurt. It's not constitutional. The 12th Amendment does not tell me I get to delay that. One more thing, Kurt. I'll give you a last word, and then we'll move on to the next.
Hello?
Yeah, sorry, Kurt. Go ahead. You broke up a little bit there, but I'll give you the last word. I've been doing plenty of talking. You go ahead.
Hey, I just wanted to voice my opinion to you. And as far as I'm concerned, our government in Washington has gone to hell. And I don't have any trust in it. And I think I speak for a lot of people, but I'm not going to say I'm doing. But anyway, I need to get off here so that you can answer other calls and stuff. And so thank you for taking my time.
Well, you bet. And Kurt, listen, I can tell you're a patriot. I can tell you're somebody who loves this country. Your frustration is shared by millions, and I think you and I both know that. So, all right, Kurt and I apologize to everybody. He and I got bickering, and we want to take calls about 3 times faster than that, and that's my fault. And so, Jasmine, who's next?
Kathy from Rapid City, you're on the line.
Thank you. Congressman Dusty Johnson, thank you so much for taking the time.
You bet, of course, Kathy.
It. I've written you several letters. I'm absolutely concerned with what's going on. And I have to agree with the gentleman that you were just on the phone with. We are all very upset over this whole thing. There has been fraud. The Dominion voting machines automatically switched votes for Biden. He got more votes than Obama, which is unbelievable. He spent most of his campaign in the basement. I'm so upset at all the fraud, and even though you're saying it's all federal, government that was appointed by Trump, I don't think anybody investigated their bank accounts. Follow the money. Find out where this money went, where their money is, and then you'll find the fraud, and you'll find why they're doing what they did. But more than anything, 4 busloads of Antifa were bussed into D.C. yesterday. There was peaceful protest. I mean, look at all those people that were there. 4 busloads of Antifa were bussed in. They were dressed, some of them in Antifa dressing and some in MAGA dressing. And the D.C. mayor allowed this. They planned this. And she should be under prosecution, investigated and prosecuted, especially for the death of that woman. Why isn't this addressed? Why doesn't anybody look into this? The Democrats are as crooked as they can be, and I feel if any Republicans don't stand up to this, I mean, globalism is taking over. This is scaring me. I mean, I think I'm going to have to move out of this country. And it's scaring me to bits that what's happening today is going to affect future generations. Congressman, I'm 68. I'm going to be dead when this all is said and done. But what about future generations? What about your children and your grandchildren? Do you want them living in a socialist, communist society? And right now you have a fraudulent Senate race in Georgia. You have a fraudulent presidential race. I don't care if it's all these Republicans. The courts did not want to even look at any of the evidence.
Hey, Kathy, let's go ahead and wrap up because we promised we'd go faster.
Okay, so why didn't you stand with our president?
Okay, well, as far as what happened yesterday, Kathy, the Constitution did not give me the power. Now, let's be clear, it's not conservative to seize power that is not legally given to me. That's called tyranny. And I just want to read the sentence one more time for everybody. Here's what the Constitution tells me I was to do yesterday. The President of the Senate shall, in the presence of the Senate and the House, open the certificates, and the votes shall then be counted. Now, I'm used to my colleagues on the left side of the aisle telling me about, how flexible words in the Constitution are, and we can twist them to mean that, and we can twist them to mean this thing, and, oh my gosh, it doesn't say that, but we can read between the lines. But a more conservative approach has been we got the plain meaning of the words or the plain meaning of the words. So I want everybody to think about that sentence I just read. Now, you can have two choices. Do you think that sentence means that I am supposed to witness a ceremonial act, or do you think the founders intended that sentence to create a super court able to overturn all of the decisions of the courts in the states with which the House disagreed? Now, if you like what's behind door number 2, that will have a chilling impact on the future of our republic. Because of what you've said is that in the future, the House and the Senate get to be a super court overturning election decisions in states and courts that they don't agree with. That is going to be a real problem for our republic, for sure. Kathy, thank you for mentioning death, because some people may not know it's relatively late-breaking news, but one of the law enforcement officers that responded to the violence last night died a little while ago, and added to the other deaths that we had last night, I think it reminds us about the tragic costs. One other thing before we can take the next caller, with regard to, people confused that Biden got more votes than Obama, and how is that possible? I've also heard, how is it possible the Republicans had such a good night on election night? And it's true, not a single House Republican lost his or her seat on November 3rd. So how did all the Republicans do so great, but the president didn't? Isn't that fishy? And I just want to point to South Dakota. In South Dakota, I think our elections are incredibly well done. I think Kristi Noem does a good job. I think Steve Barnett does a good job. And those same things that we just talked about as being concerning happen in South Dakota too. So Joe Biden got more votes this time than Barack Obama did under his reelection campaign in South Dakota. And also in South Dakota, although we're Trump country, Donald Trump got fewer votes than I did, fewer votes than Mike Rounds did, and fewer votes than Public Utilities Commissioner Gary Hansen did. And so a lot of these data anomalies that people think are concerning happened not just in the swing states, but also in South Dakota, and with very few exceptions across the whole country. So, all right, let's go next here, Jasmine.
Harry from Sioux Falls, you're live.
From Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Okay, all right. So you're saying that the whole process of asking for anybody that would object is a big sham?
Yeah,
and
the electoral.
That'd be one.
Sorry, go ahead.
That question, and then here's the other take on the Constitution. It says the votes shall be counted. That just sets up a framework and a procedure on how to arrive at a total. It doesn't say Congress can't do X, Y, Z, and what the Constitution doesn't spell out can be left to the legislator to come up with procedures.
Well, Perry, it's a novel theory. Perry, it's clearly not. Listen, the founders and the writers of the Constitution were not dummies. In just a few paragraphs earlier in the Constitution, they made it clear that that Congress would quote, be the judge of the outcome of congressional races. So they use that phrase very purposely, be the judge. And in fact, Congress is able to exhibit a tremendous amount of power over seating their own members. If the founders wanted Congress to, quote, be the judge of these certifications, then that's what they would have said, but they didn't. And in fact, they did not, I want to correct you, they did not say that Congress counts. They just said that Congress is to be present. It's the President of the Senate, that's the Vice President of the U.S., who does the counting. And so they could have had us be the judge. They chose not to, and here's how we also know that. The 12th Amendment came about in 1804. It was done because of the mess of the election of 1800. One of our earlier callers mentioned it. It was Adams-Jefferson. They went 30 rounds of voting in the U.S. House. It was a mess. The founders never wanted to have that kind of process in Congress again if they could avoid it. That's why they passed the 12th Amendment. That's why they made it a ceremonial act. And that's why they said later on in the Electoral Count Act that the state certifications would be conclusive. All right, Jasmine, what else we got?
Bob from Rapid City, you're on the line.
Hello, Representative Johnson. This is Bob. I have a more, well, it's about the violence that I watched on C-SPAN. Sure. I watched the entire day just watching C-SPAN because I wanted to see the news as you could see it. And it was clearly obvious later in the day that what you saw were people coming from what looked to be about the location of Nancy Pelosi's office window, and then stepping onto a window washing scaffold. And then a little bit later, we saw how they got into the Capitol building, which was the same method Antifa used. And I cannot imagine. I've been to several large rallies on the mall that were completely peaceful on different topics. But when you saw the same tactics for you gaining access to the building, gaining access to the stairway up to the next floor up on top where all the offices are, and then to see people coming out of Nancy Pelosi's window onto the scaffolding. Can you give us any information about were those people arrested? There were 60 people arrested, I was told today, in the Capitol during that takeover. What were their political affiliations, or did you get any indication from the Capitol Police that these people were truly former Trump conservatives?
Yeah, great question, Bob. And obviously, there's a lot of information floating around out there on that. So, and I've seen some of the stuff on, a lot of the stuff that you see on Facebook or Parler or Twitter is clearly not factual. I think there are some news reports that maybe some Antifa people would have been there. There's some photographs circulating that may be accurate. But I do think, to your question, Bob, most of the people who've been picked up, the identities that have been revealed, are not Antifa. That's not to say some Antifa weren't there, but clearly there were some of the MAGA army there too. I would give you 3 names that have come out in the media just today. Tragically, Ashley Babbitt, that Air Force veteran who was shot trying to climb through the glass to try to pierce the House chamber. She was the one that was shot and killed, and she was a big Trump supporter and for a number of years, certainly not Antifa. Derek Evans is in some trouble. He is a Republican West Virginia legislator, relatively young person, relatively newly elected, but he's been a longtime Republican activist. In Nancy Pelosi's office, somebody who they're looking for right now, they haven't put their hands on him, but they've identified him, a gentleman from Arkansas by the name of Richard Barnett. And he was in Pelosi's office and took some papers or maybe some envelopes from her. And he's a longtime freedom activist and I think was a leader in the Tea Party there in Arkansas. So it's not all Antifa, no matter what we may be reading out there on the social media. So thanks for the question, Bob.
Jessica from Irene, you're on the line.
Hi, Dusty. Listening to this, I'm almost appalled at the ignorance of our statesmen, because I can't believe that the state that I live in would have so many people not understanding how things work and see the writing on the wall for months. But I want to know where you stand with the 25th Amendment, if you support that happening against Donald Trump for his part that he played in riling up this crowd and encouraging them to do what they did. And if you do not support that, why?
Sure. Thanks, Jessica.
I guess I also would like to know how you can sympathize with some of these, like that Ashley. It's tragic that she died, yes, but she was a traitor and she should die, as should all of these people that overtook my country's capital.
Well, thanks, Jessica. And we talked earlier about how there'd be some things that, I'll disagree with almost any caller. And so I just respectfully, I want to push back on your characterization of Ashley. She did break the law. She was trespassing. She was engaged, it looks probably in acts of violence. And I think she should have been arrested and held accountable. Early reports indicate she was unarmed. And I don't know yet that we have reason to believe she was causing, or she was a source of risk of death or grave bodily harm to anybody. And that's the standard. I mean, when you, not just for citizens, but for the police, you can't pull that trigger to deploy lethal force unless you believe that you're at risk or somebody else is at risk of death or bodily harm. And I don't want to render final judgment until we know all the facts, but I wish Ashley Babbitt was alive today, even if she engaged in tactics that I find repugnant. And I do. I would not have stormed the Capitol. I think it's wrong. I think it's inexcusable. I just don't know that the punishment for that is for all of them should be death, as you suggested. And then secondly, before I answer your question about the 25th Amendment, I like the caliber of the questions. I don't think people, I think there have been some misconceptions. Frankly, there's been a lot of bad information around out there. That's one of the reasons we do these things, is so we can teach one another. And so I'm not inclined to, insult the intelligence of the good men and women on both sides of the aisle who are just trying to learn more by being a part of this call. So 25th Amendment, I don't support it. For those of you who don't know, the 25th Amendment is where the cabinet and the vice president can attempt to seize power from the president against his will. Now, sometimes the president can acquiesce, but it's never been seized away from the president against his or her will in our country's history. I think right now is a time where we need to come together. We need some healing. January 20th is going to be here before we know it, and I think it would do as much to divide the nation as almost anything to have what some people, I'm not saying I would characterize it this way, but I think millions of Americans would characterize that as a coup by a large group of largely unelected officials. And if the president challenges that, and I think he most certainly would, the decision by the cabinet would need to be ratified by, I believe, 2/3 of the House and Senate. That seems incredibly unlikely to happen. And so I think talking about the 25th Amendment is more of a political statement than I think it is a practical way to govern our country, and that's why I'm opposed to it. So thanks for the question, though, very much. All right, who's next? And I think that was Jessica, so thanks, Jessica.
Doug from Rapid City, you're on the line.
Hello, Dusty. Thanks for taking my call.
Yeah, go ahead, Doug.
We're supporters of President Trump and of you, and we are struggling with accepting the results of this election without seeing without seeing it fully investigated. And I really would love to see a full and open investigation of all the potential fraud that's been alleged, and I'm just not seeing that. And I wonder why that's not out there. The mainstream media, I have a hard time trusting. I don't really have a good source I can go to. I have to search through everything to try to find truth, and it's difficult. And we have systems to fully investigate these kinds of things through congressional committees and commissions, and I haven't seen any move towards that. Can you tell me why?
Yeah, incredibly respectfully said, Doug, and I think very to the point. Excellent job. And I'll push back a little bit on the idea that there have not been a full analysis of these election results. And again, I know not everybody on the call believes that, but go back and watch the debate last night on the floor. I'm sure some of you did. But one of the things that a member of one of my colleagues from Arizona reminded me, because Arizona was the state we were debating, was that there had been a total statewide precinct by precinct hand recount in Arizona, and they compared that to the machine results, and there was no difference. And some people have alleged tonight on the phone, I didn't push back in real time because I was trying to hurry, that, all these court cases have been thrown out just on technicalities. It's not true. It's particularly not true in Arizona. There was an Arizona state trial court that reviewed evidence and rejected it. The Arizona Supreme Court reviewed evidence and rejected it. The federal courts in Arizona, again, in so many of these federal courts, you've got Trump-appointed judges. The Arizona federal court reviewed the evidence and rejected it. And so there has been over the course of 60 days a robust analysis. And remember, in 5 of these 6 states, we have Republican legislatures. And in every one of these states, we have a Republican U.S. attorney and a Republican U.S. marshal. I'm not saying that there isn't widespread fraud, right? What I'm saying is that there has been no court-filed evidence that has convinced any of the 60 courts that the claims of widespread fraud are credible. And in fact, in a couple dozen court cases, the Trump legal team stipulated, agreed to in their filing, that there was not widespread fraud. Now, again, I'm not saying I'm agreeing with them. They know more about the facts on the ground than I do, but I'm just saying that there's not a lot of evidence. Now, you don't have to believe me. I suggest a number of you are big fans of Lou Dobbs. He's a strong voice of the far right, and it was a few nights ago Lou Dobbs said he was curious. He said, we've been looking for 8 weeks, and we still don't have verifiable, tangible proof of widespread fraud. And I think at some point, a lot of us have to acknowledge what Lou Dobbs is saying is more accurate than not. As far as some sort of a commission, I think you're going to see something like that, because I think there's a lot of frustration, not just by me, not just by you. I think a lot of the things that frustrate me, though, probably don't go under the heading of fraud. I don't like states where they mail everybody a ballot. Now, those things can be done legally. I think state legislatures have voted and made those decisions. I think they're bad policy decisions. Maybe some of you want to federalize the elections and prohibit states from doing that. But I think that is the kind of, and I think you may have a lot of proposals to get that done. I wouldn't probably call that fraud. I think I would call that poor public policy. So, all right, Jasmine, what's next?
Marguerite from Rapid City, you're on the line.
Dusty, I'm calling from Rapid City.
Hi, Marguerite. How are you doing?
I'm going to put you on speaker because I have 150 people here that want to say something to you.
Okay, I think we'll move on. Next, we're going to go to Frank from Armor.
So what was that, Jasmine? We weren't making that buzzing noise. That was Marguerite, right?
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Well, that was not the respectful posture that I expected from my friend Marguerite, but that's all right. Go ahead, Frank.
Okay, hi, Dusty. I don't think that incumbents is going to be a strong point for any of the elected officials. I pretty much agree with the fellow from Phillip. I'm sorry, I just watched 4 years of them chasing Trump for everything, and a lot of it appeared to me that he couldn't fit in the good old boys club of Washington, deep state, rhinos, that bunch, let alone Democrats. And I watched Pelosi and Schumer lie to us for 4 years. I watched Antifa and BLM, and then of course, the mainstream media, you and I both agree, are against both of us and that stuff. But I'm very, very disappointed in, I almost feel at times you blame shift. I'm not trying to be mean, but it's Trump's this and it's Trump's that. No, don't blame shift. It's Washington's problem. And I have a problem that they don't at least look harder at these elections and that stuff. In the 230, man, when Zuckerberg's got the guts to come out and, well, I'm going to ban speech. Baloney. I've listened to Nazis on a stupid, little podcast or some stupid thing like that. I'm saying no free speech should be banned. And my father, that was a World War II vet, said if America ever loses, it's going to be our enemy will never fire a bullet. And I told him as a 10 or 12-year-old boy, I don't believe you, Dad. And I'm going like I'm 74 years old now, and I'm going like, holy cows, evidently he's a prophet. And Dusty, our South Dakota delegation is not, maybe you're a little better off, but we're really questioning it. 60 days to us doesn't seem like 4 years of listening to $50 million 2-year Mueller investigation and all that other stuff that we had to patiently sit through. And now we're disappointed in, I don't know, I can't put it on you, you're one guy there, but I'm disappointed in the collective group of Washington Republicans that they can't investigate it. And it looks like the rhinos have just, once a minute this election started shifting, you keep saying, well, we got Republicans here or there. Well, first of all, I don't trust the Republicans in Pennsylvania or Georgia, for example, or Arizona. And I've
Frank,
watched
we want to make
those
sure
hearings.
So,
I'm
Frank,
not being
Frank,
mad
do
at
you?
You know that.
No. Listen, you've been great. This is a good question. I understand you don't trust the Republicans in Pennsylvania. Do you trust?
And Georgia.
Okay, no, that's fine. Do you trust the U.S. Senate that's controlled by Chuck Schumer?
No.
Do you trust the U.S. House of Representatives controlled by Nancy Pelosi?
I don't trust Mitch McConnell with his wife, and
Frank,
they're in China.
So, but here's my issue. We have to trust somebody with the integrity of our elections. And
right.
People who wanted me to the only reason I mention all these Republicans in these states is that generally people, now maybe this isn't right or appropriate, but generally people are more distrustful of folks of the other political party.
Generally, that's true. I agree with you.
So you don't like the Republican governor, the Republican Secretary of State, the Republican House, the Republican Senate.
Oh, I like the House. I like the House.
No. I'm talking to Georgia though. Like you don't trust Georgia.
Yeah.
Now, I would tell, but if you don't trust all of those locally elected officials and Donald J. Trump appointed law enforcement officials to do by election integrity, how in the world could you trust the most partisan body in the history of humankind, the United States Congress?
Well, let me ask you this, Dusty. 4 years I've been listening to all that bull garbage of Mueller and Russia, and I felt that a lot of Republicans like yourself, possibly, and these others, weren't the biggest Trump backers, as if he didn't come in the normal political route. He was kind of a Washington outsider that came in because at least he would speak for a guy like me or the guy from Phillip or the lady from Rapid City or Sioux Falls. We're not trying to pick on you, Dusty. We know you want a political career, but, man, Thune has made a mess of his potential future and Rounds, I think, because we don't trust you guys anymore because we thought you would at least investigate.
Well, and Frank, let me listen. The president,
and I'm not going to pick on you.
Okay. Well, no, I get it, Frank. I mean, I totally get it, and thank you. First off, I want to tell you, I don't want a political career. That's an accusation you level without evidence. I took a 50% pay cut to have this job. I love serving our state. I love serving our country, but I am not hungry for this power. And you want to know how you know that's true? You know that's true because clearly the vote I took yesterday was not the most popular thing I was ever going to do. I'm sure it teed off a lot of people. So the only thing I cared about was my political career. We'd be having a very different conversation right now. Now, you say I don't support Trump. You're entitled to your opinion, Frank, but the president disagrees with you. The president asked me to co-chair his reelection campaign in South Dakota. I was honored to say yes. The president gave me his full and complete endorsement for this most recent election. I was honored to have it. I was on the whip team to get the president's U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement across the finish line. We successfully did that. The president and his chief of staff reached out to me and asked me to be part of just 6 members of the House who negotiated a bipartisan COVID-19 package because we were trying to get around Speaker Pelosi, who was slowing things around. So time and time again, when the president has needed to identify one of his key working partners in Congress, he's reached out to me. And I don't think he's a stupid man. I think if he felt like I wasn't somebody that was good to work with, he could have found plenty of other people who were willing to do those things. So anyway, thank you, Frank. Oh, Section 230. Gosh, you're right on Section 230, Frank. You're 100% right. We have real problems, and as a country, we have got to tackle with the power that these large tech companies have. So thank you. I agree with you. All right, Jasmine, what's next?
Nathan from Rapid City, you're up.
Representative Johnson, how are you doing this evening?
Hey, Nathan, I'm fine. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. My question, I have all sorts of concerns about the election fraud and everything else, but I could spend the next 10 years focused on this and not look forward to what's going to happen. And I want to know if you're not primaried the next election, what can you tell your constituents to reassure them that this isn't going to turn into, as we have a Democratic-controlled government, it's not going to turn into a world of free stuff. The Roman Empire collapsed because all of the citizens were rioting in the streets demanding bread and circuses. And it seems like the far left wants free everything, and nothing is free. I've spent my life earning everything that I have. I have worked for it. I have toiled for it through blood, sweat, and hard work. And the thought that my tax dollars are going to go to these $600 checks and possibly $1,200 checks, and I understand there are families that are suffering because of what's going on right now, but I can't agree with the fact that my grandchildren are going to be paying for this.
Nathan, awesome. Just awesome. And stick on the line. Don't go anywhere here because you may have a follow-up. I think you're awesome. I'm loving everything you're saying. You're right. I voted against the $2,000 checks. That was an unpopular thing I did. But like you, I feel like there are suffering families. You're right. And I think we want to target our relief to people who need it rather than just send almost everybody in the country, $2,000 checks. That was very expensive. It was almost $500 billion was the president's proposal. You are clearly a guy who's worked for everything you've ever had in life. You sound like a really incredible American, and that is the American way. So your question for me, though, is how can we ensure that things don't go sideways on us? I do think, listen, I know so many of us are upset that Joe Biden is going to be our president. And a lot of us on the call did not vote for him. But it is not that the message of liberalism is what the American people want. Let's remember what happened on November 3rd. On November 3rd, not a single House Republican lost their seat. And in the Senate, we did better than expected by us. I mean, Republicans. I know not everybody on the call is Republican, but and frankly, had Tuesday gone better, both of those Georgia races were winnable. Republicans would hold the Senate. And I think Republicans are taking the House in 2 years. The Republican message that you just articulated, of fiscal discipline, holding people accountable, and working hard, that resonates with voters, as evidenced by what happened on November 3rd. Sorry, go ahead.
My 6-year-old son recognizes that nothing is free. Everything must be earned. So for all these, just my concern is that there's going to be rampant fiscal irresponsibility with the new administration, and I want to know what you're going to do for your constituents to fight and ensure that something like that doesn't happen, that our tax dollars don't get flushed down the liberal toilet.
Yeah, listen, it is going to take two things. It's going to take messaging loud and strong, because I do think Joe Biden is going to be, I think he's going to have a choice. I think he's going to have to dance with somebody. And he can choose to dance with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the people in the extremes of his party, in which case I think we all need to make it clear that that's unacceptable, that is not the appropriate way to govern this country, and use the kind of rhetoric that you just used. I think to make the American people stand up, and frankly, I think a lot of the members of the House who are more moderate on the Democratic side, I think they will be receptive to that kind of those kind of arguments. Joe Biden can do something different. Instead of trying to roll over Republicans by working with AOC, he can try to find common ground in things like infrastructure that you and I understand is critically important for the private sector. You got things like good roads, you got things like broadband, and the private sector can come along behind that and make investments where people can build strong families and strong small businesses. So that's one thing. I mean, I think being willing to enter the fray of battle with strong policy discussions is one. The second thing is, and I don't want to turn this into too political because it's not a political call, it's a policy call. But frankly, Republicans need to take back the House in 2 years. And I'm going to work really hard to make sure that happens. All right, who's next, Jasmine?
Rowena.
Oh, I should mention, Jasmine, because I kind of buried the lead on this deal. I am a sponsor of the balanced budget amendment. We should have a balanced budget in this country. The kind of things that Nathan was talking about on spending should bother every single one of us on this call, whether you're left, right, or center. And a balanced budget, like the kind of thing the state of South Dakota has to do every year. If we had that in D.C., we would have much, much better decision making.
Rowena, you're on the line. Okay.
Rowena from Doland, you're on. You may be muted on your end. Oh, and we lost her.
I think
Jasmine, do you have any idea what Rowena's question was about?
No, I do not. We're going to go to David. Do you remember what it was?
I think it was on concern that some states don't require an ID. And so I'll just answer that quick, and then we can take the next caller, which will be, what do we want, David?
Sure.
Okay, David, you'll be next, but hold on. I'm going to answer Rowena's question even though we lost her. I do think people should be showing an ID. I mean, you can't get a library card if you don't show an ID. I like the way we do it in South Dakota. If you show up and you've forgotten your ID, or maybe you're somebody who doesn't have a driver's license, you can still vote. It's going to be with a provisional ballot. We can count those at the end of the day once we verify that you haven't voted 3 or 4 times. I like the way South Dakota does it. I think states that don't require some sort of identification are wrong. I think states that mail everybody a ballot are wrong. I think states that do a lot of the really, I think, unfortunately, flexible rules make it easier for voting irregularities to creep in and for people to game the system. I think if we could export the South Dakota system, we'd be in better shape. But that being said, I think we want to do that within the states. And you see Georgia's doing that. Today I read a big article about how the Georgia legislature is working to do some things with their absentee ballots, so it's not quite so much the wild, wild west. That's the kind of reform we need. So, all right, David, sorry, go ahead.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Did you watch the hearings before the Pennsylvania legislature group about people testifying about voter fraud?
I caught part of it, not all of it.
And when you say, they recounted the votes, but if they're still counting the votes of people who voted in 2 different states, or when they looked up the addresses, there was no such address, or when dead people voted, if they're still counting illegal votes, you're still going to get, a wrong count. And I think, a lot of people saw the video of the Atlanta Counting Center where they thought they were done counting votes for the night and they were sent home, and 4 election officials stayed after everybody was gone, and they brought out the suitcases, and we saw the surveillance video, and they continued to put in votes all night until Biden won. And how can millions or maybe even 100 million people accept the results of this election when we've heard the people testify in Pennsylvania, when we've seen this evidence of, people who were dead or wrong address or voted in 2 states, and when we've watched the video, how can we not consider it a stolen election?
Well, David, good question, and we probably should have taken this one to ones earlier because I just think it's a foundational concern a lot of people have, and I think here's my concern. I mean, I have probably had either myself or my team. I bet we spent 1,000 hours running some of these allegations to the ground. And I've talked to my colleagues who, many of their offices have probably spent 1,000 hours running things to the ground. And it is really hard to prove these allegations. It's really hard. Now, many of them that we look into, we can very clearly debunk as just garbage or a misunderstanding or somebody trying to cause problems. And I'm not saying they're all bunk, but I'm saying a lot of them are bunk. And I think that's why people like Lou Dobbs are so frustrated, saying, I think widespread fraud happened, but how come we don't have any hard, tangible evidence? And I'm not saying you're wrong, David. What I'm saying is that there's not a single judge in the country who has agreed with you yet. And what I'm saying is that there's not a single Trump law enforcement appointee in the country who agrees with you yet. And I think, at least in my mind, that means that we all need to be real careful before we allege that there is widespread fraud when there has been no court-filed evidence of such. And that the Trump legal team has stipulated in many of these states that there was not widespread fraud. All right, what's next?
Next, we're going to go to Bob from Yankton. And before I do, I think it's important to point out that the video mentioned was debunked by the Republican officer of elections in the state. Bob from Yankton.
I should mention, I don't want anybody to think I think all of the elections are hunky-dory. There are clearly serious irregularities, and I think one person in Pennsylvania has been charged with voting for his dead mother, and that's exactly how we want this system to work. I know some people, maybe some of our friends on the call tonight on the left might say, well, one vote, what's that about? Well, yeah, but one vote's one vote. We don't want the message to get out that you can vote for your dead mother, and you'll be, and nothing will happen to you, because otherwise we'll get more of that. So this guy voted for his dead mother. He broke the law. I think we need to hold him accountable, and we should do that anytime we see any of those kind of voting irregularities and a violation of the law. Sorry, go ahead.
Am I on the line now?
Yep, you're on the line.
Hey, Dusty, how you doing?
I'm fine.
All right. Well, I think we met a couple times, but we won't get into that. Right.
Oh, is it Bob Burns?
The debunked question was about the video. That's fine. Okay, there was Antifa and Black Lives Matter people in that mob yesterday. How did we not figure that out? I mean, Trump supporters at the Trump rallies are always peaceful, and even though his Trump speech was a little fiery, I mean, even though like I said, the debunked video is what I saw the video. I saw the guy waving him in, but if it's debunked, it's debunked. Okay, my second question is this. Where in the Constitution is the domain server who counts the votes? Why was Germany and some other countries, why were their results different than ours?
What do you mean, Bob, when you say why were German results different than ours?
I've seen on reports that Trump he did better than Reagan did against Carter. On the electoral vote, and these votes were counted in Germany. I've seen them results on Messenger, from Parler, from Twitter, and other places. But why?
So what votes
are
were
different
counted in Germany?
There, and why aren't the same here?
What votes were counted in Germany?
Our votes.
Do you mean physical ballots were carried over there?
Physical ballots, yes. It's all in this. I don't know what kind of system it is. The Dominion server.
Okay.
That's what comes up. What can you explain that Dominion server? Does that Dominion server go? I mean, is that a worldwide thing or what?
Yeah. So there are three big companies that sort of dominate this election machine business. And in 95% of the jurisdictions, even if you're using a touchscreen, you have to have a ballot printed out. And that's another, as I've talked about the things that I believe in election, I think you have to have a hard ballot. You have to. I don't mind a touchscreen, but then the touchscreen should print out a ballot that you can review and look at and drop off. And that hard ballot provides an audit trail for us. I think it is critically important. And in the overwhelming majority of any of the counties that chose to use Dominion, the hard ballot analysis matches the data. And the president's appointed board of digital election security released a report a few weeks ago that they had evaluated the Dominion performance, and there was no evidence. And they said there was no chance that the kind of distortion that you talked about actually happened, because they were able to verify so much of the data tied back to things like ballots. So, okay. What else we got, Jasmine?
Mark from Hill City, you'll be our last question of the night.
Oh, before we go, Mark, everybody, I'm sorry we didn't get to everybody. You can tell we're working quick, and you can tell we've taken a lot of very tough questions tonight because I really enjoy this. I think this is some of my colleagues in the U.S. House, they hide out. They don't like to take the tough questions. When they take the tough votes, they just sort of try to disappear. That's not my way. I think you know that about me, and so I'm going to keep working for you. And listen, you're not always going to agree with me. I'm not always going to agree with you, but I really like the caliber of the conversation we've had tonight. Even when we've been kind of bickering back and forth, you can tell people have been coming from a good place, and I think that's the South Dakota way. So thank you, and go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, Dusty, I'm just wondering, now that we're at the sort of the sunset of the Trump era, what is the future of conservatism as you see going forward? I'm thinking broader than the fiscal issues that have been brought up by another caller, but conservatism generally. And do you feel like we're in a place to have a positive trajectory? I'm not so sure that we're in a place to have a positive trajectory with the electorate generally in moving kind of true conservative ideas forward.
Yeah, it's a concern for me too, Mark. And again, on the call tonight, I'm not getting paid to be a Republican. I'm getting paid to be a congressman for everybody. But I'll answer your question since you asked it. I'm concerned about the future of conservatism. I believe in that worldview through and through. And I think the problem we've got, and it's not just with conservatism, it's with liberalism too, is that I think both sides have gotten so angry and so outraged that they have started to adopt an ends justifies the means approach, which is, hey, anything I got to go do to win that hill is okay. Maybe it's not lawful, maybe it's not ethical, maybe it's not pretty, maybe it's not cute, but anything it takes, this is total war. And that is now, conservatism has been most successful at the ballot box when it has been problem-solving focused, when it has been optimistic. Ronald Reagan changed hearts and minds unlike anybody else in this country's history, probably since our founding days. And, Nancy Pelosi 2 years ago brought forth this massive bill that was going to federalize our elections. It was going to dictate minimum standards to every state. It did a lot of things I didn't like. I voted against it. You know what, Mark? Literally every single conservative I talked to in the wake of that vote said, gosh darn it, Dusty, good job. I don't want DC telling us how to run our elections. South Dakota can handle that. We should not federalize our elections. That's not what the Constitution says. Well, lo and behold, in an ends justifies the means environment, now all of a sudden, in the last few weeks, I have had hundreds of conservatives tell me that we need to do something to federalize elections, that we need some sort of minimum standards. Now, listen, maybe they're right. I'm not attacking either policy approach right now. What I am saying is that it is remarkable in the course of a year that a deep-held conservative value could evaporate so quickly because the impact on today's politics was viewed through a different lens. And so, Mark, I think the future of conservatism is good as long as we stay focused on solving problems, as long as we stay focused on the Constitution, which is a beautiful, magnificent, blessed document that has guided this beautiful, magnificent, blessed country for 245 years. And I think as long as we continue to talk about these issues in a way that is going to make this country better, and that message, I think, wins every single day out. So thanks, Mark. Thanks, everybody else, for being good South Dakotans. Even if we disagree, I know you love your country. I certainly love it as well. If there's some way that we can help you, we want to. We got a dedicated team. If you stay on the line as we hang up, then you can leave us a message. And speak slowly. Leave us your email address if you would. At the very bare minimum, leave us your phone number. Again, say that slowly. Spell your name. That's going to give us an opportunity to follow up with you tomorrow or shortly thereafter. And it's been a real pleasure, and thanks for spending your evening with us. Take care, everybody.